And we're live. Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Toll. I'm joined again this week by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
And we've got another guest on the show this week. This week, we are talking with Andrew Davidge, who is the founder of Vintage Electric Bikes. How's it going, Andrew?
Excellent.
Awesome. So while we've got a lot of cool stories to talk about this week, one of our favorites and what we're going to start off with is the story about Vintage Electric Bikes' 72-volt line of 40-mile-an-hour electric bikes. So Andrew, we're just going to start with an easy one here. Can you tell us a little bit about Vintage Electric Bikes and what makes these unique e-bikes so much different than everything else that we see?
Yeah, I mean, we started the company all the way back in 2012. And it was really just, we wanted to build a bike that, we're all motorcycle racers, bike racers, come from car racing backgrounds. We really wanted to build bikes that were quality and could stand the test of time. And we were proud to ride. So we really started the company by building bikes for ourselves. And then people kept wanting to buy them, started off, said, okay, we'll build, 10 or 15 of these back in 2012. And then I've told this story a lot, but we went to a car show down in Monterey. We were invited to put the 2 prototypes on the red carpet, and we sold like 35 that night, which was a huge deal for us. And kind of the rest is history. So, everybody at the company cares about performance, quality, and design. So we've always just since then continued to develop the product, push the levels on performance and really quality too. We want to build bikes that don't end up in a landfill after 5 years, and we can really keep on the road for a lifetime.
Right. So definitely performance and quality are 2 hallmarks of vintage. But I think one thing that anyone watching the YouTube feed here will see immediately is that design is also really unique here. I mean, you guys have built what looks like, no other cruiser electric bike we've seen before. It's got the vintage styling, but it brings in, motorcycle vibes. It's got that sort of like V-twin style battery case. I mean, how did you guys decide to go with this unique design, and how have you developed it over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always loved the old vintage board track race bikes, from the turn of the century. And that was really the general inspiration of that. But also just love riding motorcycles, and I love riding bicycles. So it was really just blending those 2 passions together. And this is what was born. But yeah, really, when you build powerful performance machines, there's a responsibility for it. And that's why, you see the big disc brakes, the big inverted suspension forks. And then the battery box really, it does have that V-twin look, but it also is completely functional. So it works to air cool all of the electrical components inside that battery box. So it's all heat sinked. The controllers run 60% cooler hooked up to that cast aluminum battery box.
Right. And when you say high performance, I mean, you're not kidding here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these bikes have 4,000 watt peak motors, even if, they ship in 750 watt, class 2 limits. I mean, we're talking about big batteries, 1,100 watt hours, right? I mean, this is some serious performance.
Yeah. And for the new 72 volt line, we've always built bikes that have a pretty great top speed. But really the idea behind this drivetrain was low-end torque. A lot of our customers live in hilly areas, and we wanted to build a battery pack that you could go out for an all-day ride. And with this new drivetrain, you're hard braking going into corners, climbing some of the steepest hills in Northern California. So it's, yeah.
And so, Seth, you've spent some good time on some of these bikes before, right?
Yep. We Andrew and I went up to the top of Signal Hill, something.
Mount Hamilton, I think.
Mount Hamilton. Yeah, that was quite a treat. And it was a dirt road. I think we were on a 35 mile per hour bike at that point. What kind of it felt like somewhere between a motorcycle and a bike. All the components are quite I would say like over produced or over, it's just way stronger than they needed to be. Felt very stiff, and it was exciting. We were on a dirt road, we were kind of flying around. Just a great experience.
So what's new that that Seth wouldn't have been able to experience in those bikes before that's different about the 72-volt line? If he goes and rides these now, what's he going to feel that's different?
Yeah, there's lots of little details and iterations. Suspension fork, we've changed the geometry a little bit to be a little bit more stable, handle better. The brakes have been improved. But the biggest difference you would feel is the acceleration going up those hills. On our older 48-volt system, on one of the hills that we test around here, which is 15% grade, just super steep, the old bike would do 12 to 15 miles an hour up it. And then these new drivetrains in race mode will do about 30 miles an hour going up those hills. So you are truly braking going into corners, and it really just kind of brings in that motorcycle-like riding experience going up the steepest hills.
Yeah, and you mentioned braking there. So one thing I like about these is there is regenerative braking, and while regenerative braking on bikes doesn't necessarily put a lot of power back in the battery, it does kind of take some of the cost out of replacing your brakes brake pads. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how much power can you regenerate? Why can't you regen like a car that has a significant amount of regen? And do you ever have to replace brakes on these things?
Yeah, you definitely will be, depending on how you're riding, you definitely are still going to be replacing brake pads. But with our new high torque motor that we developed and the new 72-volt battery, we can actually put a lot more amps back into that battery pack quickly. So regen we've been able to bring that percentage of regen up to 20% of 4,000 watts. So it, depending on where you're at on the battery charge, you can really slow down using regen alone. And our new brakes are pretty cool. They have a full adjustment, so you can actually fully adjust your contact point of when the regen comes in. And then we can also turn up and down regen for customers via Bluetooth as well.
So is that an app that customers can use themselves, or would it have to be set by you guys?
We're working on that. Customers can use it. It's not necessarily a customer-facing app, but if a customer comes to us and says, "Hey, I've noticed this with my type of riding. Can we improve this?" We can go in there and fully adjust the riding experience for the customer.
Okay, interesting. And so I guess anyone who knows Seth and I will know that we're huge fans of high power and fast e-bikes. We love the ability to go fast and have that strong acceleration. But if I were to play devil's advocate a little bit here, I know there are always people that hear, an electric bicycle that goes 40 miles an hour. Is that really a bicycle anymore? And what is your response to that?
That's one of the main reasons why we really went back to the drawing board on low-end torque and acceleration, because that's something that can totally be enjoyed in the legal limits that the bikes are sold at. So that acceleration from 0 to 20, which is a great experience for people. And also just the hill climbing ability, being able to climb the steepest hills in San Francisco while still being under the legal limit. And on our new 72-volt bike, but also on our new Tracker Classic that we're launching, that bike speed has actually been reduced from 36 miles an hour down to about 26, 28. Because that's where a lot of our customers ride the bikes, 26, 28 miles an hour, good safe speed for getting around town. And then as far as the race mode goes, it's off-road private property only. We sell a lot of bikes in Indonesia where it's totally legal for them to be riding with race mode on public roads. And then we also sell a lot of bikes to customers who use these to get around their houses, estates type thing, but also at the racetrack as pit bikes. So when they're going out to the vintage races, they have 2 of these in their trailer. They pull them out, use them to get around the track. So as a company, I don't want to get into the top speed competition. It's we're not building motorcycles. There's motorcycles that do 200 miles an hour. People have already done it. For us, it's really refining that riding experience within kind of those legal limits, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does. And I have to admit, we get a lot of bikes to try out. I actually do feel a little bit safer on 35 mile per hour roads going 35 miles per hour versus 28 and having somebody trying to pass me. Is there any kind of I don't know, we have the neighborhood electric vehicle kind of legislation in the US. Is there any kind of legislation that's going around about another class of e-bikes, kind of more in the moped mid-range, somewhere between a motorcycle and an e-bike. Is there some way that we can drive 35 miles per hour on streets?
Yeah, I mean,
class 4.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about class 4, right? And you might know more than I do about it, but I do think that there is a need for this type of vehicle and the other vehicles you see coming out with, some, you could call them our competitors. But yeah, I mean, when you're on roads that you're riding with traffic, and these aren't nice bike paths through the park, right? You're riding on a nice bike path through the park, stick to the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. But when you're out with traffic and there's no bike paths or bike lanes, I do think that the US is in need of a different classification. And 40 miles an hour is fast. And as a company, we like building fast things. But I think that 30 to 35 mile an hour mark, maybe there's a one-time registration for the vehicle so you can get insurances and things like that. But I'm all for regulating this type of vehicle. And I think there's a spot for that class 4 compliant bike that is allowed to ride on bike paths that parallel the road, and you're out there with traffic. Because I think that's the only way that this really becomes mass market, and people are seeing these as a true alternative to hopping in their car when they just need to run down to the grocery store and grab a carton of milk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we're talking about 40-mile-an-hour electric bicycles here, I think it's important to talk about what makes an e-bike safe at those speeds. We've heard a lot of people say like, oh, why would you spend so much on a bike that goes this fast? I can get an eBay kit, overvolt it, slap it on a Huffy, and go 40 miles an hour. I think, all three of us are quite familiar with the DIY e-bike scene. So what is it about your bikes that is required to make sure that they can not only do 40 miles an hour, but do it safely?
Yeah, and that comes down to the testing standards that we do when we manufacture these. So, the frames, forks, they're all tested to downhill mountain bike or motorcycle standards, along with brakes that can keep up with it. And really, it's really a complete package that we feel comfortable selling to a customer and allowing them to go 40 miles an hour. And Seth's been on the bike, he's experienced it, and it's really just overbuilding everything. And that's the reason we get probably like 5 calls per day on people that just want to buy the drivetrains from our bikes. And we could make money doing that. But the last thing I'd want to do is see someone take one of our powerful drivetrains, put it on a Schwinn beach cruiser, and just under braking load alone on a single crown fork like that, it could snap. Their brakes wouldn't be able to handle it. The tires wouldn't be able to handle it. The rims wouldn't be able to handle it. So we shy away from selling complete kits because we want to sell an overall package that's designed and engineered to really achieve those speeds.
Yeah, I bet your lawyers probably nipped that idea in the bud before it went anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably do it. We could figure out a way to do it, but safety is a huge priority for us. And building bikes building a powerful drivetrain is almost the easy part, but making sure that it's long lasting, it'll last for years to come, and it's bolted onto a chassis that can handle it is really where we spend all of our effort.
And so the chassis are, quite striking. I think that's probably one of the things that, besides the power and the speed and the build quality, like the design, everything from the light to the body to the battery pack is like so well crafted. Do you find that people, like maybe the opposite of that, just the drivetrain, do you find that people are like, hey, I want to build my own motorcycle, but I would love to start with like your bike? Do you find anybody doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the early years, there was a lot of people that were into those, kind of the company called Lifan or those gas 2-stroke powered motors. Mm-hmm. And they would call us wanting to buy our chassis to put those 2-stroke motors in. But over the last 3 years, that's just completely disappeared. And it's like, if they're doing it, they want to do it electric, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I helped a friend in college put one of those 50cc kits on his bike. I had an electric bike. We built him that gas one, and oh man, that thing was awful. And it also burned through gas so fast. We'd have to ride around, and I had a red gas can on the back of my bike so we could fill him up when he ran out. It was terrible. I'm glad to see those things slowly disappear.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really how our company started. Was I had an old Honda 75, and I wanted to build a board track bike. So I got a frame, fork, welded up mounts for it, and made it so that Honda 75 motor could fit in it. And a friend of mine that I grew up just building crazy stuff with, he was in all my metal shop courses in high school. We built these gas-powered bikes, and the moment I took it out, I was like, this is just obnoxious. And then so I started researching electric stuff and pulled that Honda motor out and built a battery box, and that's really how the first bike was built. The first vintage electric actually had a Honda 75cc gas motor in it.
Interesting.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I've got my own Honda 50 actually that's sitting halfway converted to electric in my parents' garage, and it's this project I started, and I've got to find the time to finish it. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
My parents actually called me like 6 months ago, and they're like, "Are you ever going to get this Honda out of our garage?" It was all in pieces. So I actually had my friend restore it for me. So it's sitting up on the wall in my office.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked about Indonesia before. I'm assuming there's lots of bikes going all over the world. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of how much are domestic and foreign, and what exotic places are these things going?
Yeah, I'd say in the early days, a lot of our bikes went to Australia, the UK, and Indonesia. But with COVID, it just really exploded the whole electric bike scene here. So I'd say 75% are going to the US market now. And then the rest, there's a handful that go into the UK. We have a great retailer in London. They sell a lot of our pedal assist bikes as well. And then we have a few great dealers in Indonesia. And that was a market I just didn't even think about. But it's over there, it's very expensive to register a Harley on the road. So our bikes are a really great option. It's also hot there. And with the traffic in Jakarta, you're not really going over 30 miles an hour at any point in time. So either sitting in traffic on a air-cooled motorcycle, sweating in your suit trying to get to work, or you're on one of these things, no heat, and you can get around traffic a little bit easier. It's so much fun riding around the crazy traffic of Jakarta on one of these bikes. It's like a cheat code to the city, like it is in most cities. But
well, I was just gonna say, like any e-bike, even in New York City, is a cheat code, and obviously e-bikes have taken off there as well. So I mean, the 75% in the US, is there, are you seeing a lot in the cities? Are these kind of country bikes as well?
Yeah, so I'd say our pedal assist bike and the Cafe platform, that one's a bit more popular in cities and with a different demographic, because you can remove the battery pack, you can plug it in your apartment, your office, a bit more of just a city fast commuter bike. And that bike has a lot of power too. It's a ton of fun to ride. And then I'd say our throttle bikes are found more in the suburbs outside of cities. So people that probably have a garage, but we have a dealer that opened up in San Francisco, and they're selling a lot of them there now. But I'd say it's mostly the suburbs right outside of major cities or where we see these bikes going to.
And these batteries aren't removable on the new one, right?
They are not. It's a big battery pack.
Right.
Yeah.
There's other hardware in there too, right? Controller and stuff that would make removing it a bit trickier.
Yeah, totally. Yep, the controller, pretty much everything that makes that bike move is inside that battery box. And as the controllers have come down in size, we've been able to fit more and more battery pack inside of there.
So when consumers get your bike, it's shipped directly from your like a factory, or?
Yeah, so we bring all the bikes into our facility in Santa Clara. Mm-hmm. Then we fully assemble them, test them on our dyno, do a test ride. And then where we can, which is the majority of the United States, that bike actually leaves our facility fully assembled. It gets loaded up into a network of Sprinter vans and box trucks through a company called Kitsuma. And then it's delivered to the customer's doorstep, ready to ride.
That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and that's, for us, we do sell an expensive product, but what we're so proud of is how we stand behind it. and the customer service that we can offer. You know, if any customer has any question about their bike, they can call, and we have a team of people in Santa Clara ready to pick up the phone and talk to them. You know, we have plenty of replacement parts on hand. We have a network of shops and mobile bike shops for any service needs that they need. And we're, even with the new 72 volt kit, we started a program where we're actually picking up customers' older bikes from their homes, bringing them back to our facility for a full refurbishment, getting the upgraded battery pack into it, and then ship right back to their doorstep.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like for instance, somebody who had the older bike that you were selling, or I mean, you continue to sell, but you know, the 35 mile per hour bike, the slow one, uh, if they wanted to upgrade to this, that's in the cards.
Yep, 100%. And that's, as a brand, when we develop new technology, we always make sure it's backwards compatible. So as we develop new stuff for our future models, you know, there's going to be a point where someone who has a 72 volt bike in 5 years calls us up, say, hey, time to upgrade. We pick it up from their house, bring it back to our facility, fully refurbish the bike, get it back to them in about a month.
That's fantastic. You said a month turnaround time. If I want to order one of these today, what's the ship time on getting one of these into my garage?
Yeah, well, this year we actually have some inventory, so that's a nice change of pace for us. But we're actually almost sold out of Shelby till May. But yeah, 2 to 3 weeks at your doorstep by the time you reorder it, and we get it out to you.
That's almost instant gratification.
Almost, yeah. And then also, you know, for our customers, and you know, if someone's not completely satisfied with their bike, they have 30 days to try it out, and if it's not the perfect bike for them, we pick it up, bring it back to our facility, and give them a full refund as well. Doesn't happen a lot, but we want to make sure if we sell a bike to someone, they spent a lot of their hard-earned money on it, that it's their dream bike and they absolutely love it.
You know, I think that's huge, you know, especially at these price points. You know, this isn't a budget bike. And so to give people that confidence that, you know, they're definitely going to love their bike or you'll take it back, I think is very important. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not in we're in the business of building people's dream bikes. And if it's not that, then no hard feelings. They don't have to keep it.
Yeah, it also shows that you don't get a lot of returns if you're able to continue to offer that policy.
We don't. Once you throw your leg over one, it's like it all clicks.
Yeah,
it's a pretty cool experience, and we're just about to launch a new website, and that's the thing we always have a problem with. It's like every time a customer gets a bike, they're like, "Wow, it exceeded my expectations on quality, the paint, all the detail work on it." So it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because a lot of people come to our site or give us a call, and they're not quite sure where the money went versus, you know, there's a lot of electric kind of beach cruiser bikes out there. But when you feel the bike and ride it, it all starts to make sense.
Awesome. I love it. You've sold me. Now I just have to try one.
Yeah, we're gonna ship a couple out to you guys so you can ride them around for a while.
Oh man.
Awesome. I'm racing Seth then. First to 40.
So we should wrap up soon. I just wanted to ask a couple questions about like the battery. It looks like it has a cooling system here. Does that cool the battery?
Yeah. So the battery management system and the controller are all mounted to that die-cast aluminum housing, and with a heat sinking compound. So that whole battery box, it doesn't get hot; it'll get warm. But it just uses that entire surface area of that cast aluminum battery box to cool the electrical components.
It's a huge heat sink.
That's exactly what it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then the other question, you know, obviously I'm doing some spoke math or sprocket math here, and you know, at 45 miles per hour, I don't know if like my legs could go fast enough. Have you considered doing gears on these?
We have looked at it, and we have prototypes of everything. We have prototypes of mid drives and gears, and really just the simplicity of a single speed and giving a customer a fantastic pedal assist experience up to about 20 miles an hour is really what we've landed on with this bike. You can change gearing around a bit, but I just love the simplicity and the silence that you get from having no derailleurs, just a single speed setup. It's just, you know, if you want gears and you want that pedal assist experience, that's where our Cafe Rally line come in. 10-speed, 750 watt hub motor, and you know, still those vintage looks.
All right.
Awesome.
Well,
I have one more
satisfied me.
question real quick. I'm just pulling this out of the comments here. I noticed one of our commenters named Frederick Lambert is wondering if you ship to Canada.
We do. We actually have a full dealer network up in Canada, and I believe we just shipped all of our bikes up there. So there's bikes in Canada ready to be purchased, and so you can either call us. We have a sales team always ready to pick up the phone. Call us, and we can set you up with our dealers up in Canada.
That's amazing. All right. Well, geez, this is awesome. You've like just talking about this for a half hour. I'm just kind of like doing math on my finances and thinking, is this something I should invest in? And kind of feels like I should.
Well, we'll get a couple bikes out there. And where are you guys located again?
I'm in New York.
Are you both in New York, or?
I do most of my riding in Florida, but I go all over.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely get some of our demo bikes sent out to you guys, because I know you rode the 48 volt bike, but this is a totally different animal.
All right. Well, I mean, the 48 volt was pretty fun too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Seth's comparison.
Yeah.
Cool. Me too.
All right, Andrew. Appreciate you spending some time with us. This has been super informative, and we love to talk shop with you all the time. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Great.
All right. Moving on.
So we're going in a totally different direction in terms of e-bikes now, right? So we were just with high power, high cost e-bikes. What do we have coming up next, Seth?
All right. Lectric eBikes unveils XPremium, low cost mid-drive folding electric bike with torque sensor.
So this is a amazingly affordable mid-drive electric bike. When Lectric unveiled this thing, like I just couldn't believe the price. So $1,799 bucks. But
hey,
what you're getting here is pretty incredible. So it's a mid-drive motor. It's made by a company called Truck Run, which is actually becoming a fairly popular motor. A lot of people don't know it by name yet, but it's on a lot of e-bikes. There are hydraulic brakes. We've got 2 batteries there for around 1 kilowatt hour of capacity. And I mean, this thing is just like knocking it out of the park. Front suspension, which has, I think, twice the travel of the Lectric XP 2.0. So, there are a lot of other e-bikes out there in the $1,800 range that are still rocking mechanical disc brakes, 1 battery, and a hub motor. So for a budget company like Lectric e-bikes to roll out something that's so much, higher up the market really surprised me in such a good way, because I think this is really going to open the door to people who got into, Lectric XP or a really budget bike, because their base model's $1,000, and now they want to upgrade to something a little nicer. They want that higher torque for climbing hills. They want a torque sensor in their motor so that their pedal assist is really natural feeling and intuitive. They want the longer range. This has twice the battery capacity of Lectric's other, base Lectric XP 2.0. So, the value here, I think, is pretty incredible. I mean, have you ever seen an e-bike for $1,800 that has all of these parts?
With 2 batteries and mid-drive? No.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to take in here, and it's a folder, like on top of all that, which adds, a bit of cost right there, because you've got to make the frame more robust. Probably saves on shipping a little, because you can ship in a bit of a smaller box. But that's another cool thing, by the way, though, is that it ships fully assembled, which, we both get a lot of bikes for testing, and spending a half hour or an hour bolting together a bike out of a box is not fun. So the fact that it shows up, just folded up in a box and you pop it out ready to ride is pretty awesome. So
yeah,
I'm really bullish about this in terms of how it's going to open up sort of the mid-drive market. The one thing that I do worry about a little bit is there are going to be a lot of riders out there that just don't know the difference between mid-drive and hub motors, and they don't realize that you can't just, leave it in top gear all the time, and that you can't be, railing on the throttle while you're shifting. So Lectric is going to have to do a bit of rider education in terms of, teaching people the differences between an entry-level hub motor bike and how to really ride a mid-drive. But I'm really excited about the potential for this one.
And yeah, talk a little bit more about the mid-drive motor here. Who makes it, and what kind of power is it? And it does have a throttle on it, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely throttle enabled. And I remember talking to the guys when they were, first rolling out this design sort of within the company when it was still embargoed, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not sure if we're going to go throttle or not." I was like, "Dude, you got to put a throttle on this thing. Like, it's too awesome to not have a throttle." So definitely throttle. It's made by a company called Truck Run. Their motors are on the PX cycle, the Priority Current, which is my personal bike. That's one that after a review, instead of sending it back, I asked the company if I could just buy it because it's such an awesome bike and I love that motor. I mean, it's so smooth. It's got a torque sensor, so the pedal assist feels really nice. It's 500 watts nominally, but it's closer to 800 actual peak watts. So, when you're flying up a hill, you're really getting like 800 watts of power. And the thing is just, nice and smooth. It's a little bit louder than, something like a Broza motor, but dollar to dollar, pound to pound, I would say that it's a great value to get the performance of a nicer mid-drive motor and still be able to offer a bike at a price like this.
Yeah, and the suspension, is it like kind of a high quality, mid quality?
I'm not sure who makes that fork, but it is a hydraulic oil fork. It's not just
Okay,
like a cheap Springer fork or something like
right.
that. So, it's really got some decent damping there. It's not just like you're bouncing around on one of those like tinny sounding springs.
That's awesome. It looks like a super fun bike. So this just came out. When are they shipping? Are they shipping now or?
I think they're going to ship in, it's either June or July. They're taking orders on Monday. So they like announced it, but they're not going to start taking orders till next week, and then shipping is this summer.
Awesome. So not moving far from the electric. We're now going to talk about the ultra affordable 799 Lectric XP Lite electric bike and your test ride.
Yeah, definitely. So this is like the other end of the spectrum. They rolled this out just under 2 weeks ago, and compared to their sort of base level Lectric XP 2.0, this is like a little bit smaller in every way. So the motor is a little less powerful. It's a 300 watt continuous 720 peak. It's got a slightly smaller battery, about 375 watt hours, significantly lighter. It's like 20 pounds lighter at 46 pounds.
Wow.
And it's a single speed. So you don't get the, 7 speed that they've got on the XP. But what that does do, and it doesn't have the suspension. But what that does do is it let them shave a couple $100 off the price. So if you want, a light, small folding e-bike that doesn't have suspension, doesn't have big fat tires, but gets you a 48-volt system, pretty powerful, decently fast at class 2 speeds at $800. I mean, this like blows away the quality of like an Anchier or
Sure.
like a Walmart e-bike or something like that.
Right, but it costs the same, which is incredible, or roughly the same. Maybe
Right. And
maybe
these guys, I mean,
$200.
they're a Phoenix-based company. If you call support, they pick up the phone.
Right.
Like I was there, I saw their support team. They even told me that at least at the time, they didn't advertise that they have support on the weekends, but they actually do have teams there. So some people will call and they're just surprised to get somebody.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, this reminds me a little bit of like Rad Mini or what's the new Rad Fold
The
called?
Expand
The
5.
Expand, but it's got a lot of the same features, but comes in a little bit less price wise. Uh,
Yeah, it's I mean, there are some downsides here. The smaller battery, it's Uh, not half the size of Rad's, but a little over half the size of that battery, and the power is lower. It's not the
mhm.
750 watt motor on Rad, so there are some trade-offs, but it's significantly lighter and significantly less expensive. So when you're talking about this very diverse ecosystem of e-bikes out there, to see something that's pretty good quality for this low of a price is impressive. Now, if you're into high quality bikes, this is not a high quality e-bike, but it's a pretty good quality bike.
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling offer, I have to say. Like, for 799, you're not like, this is the first time I've seen a bike for 799 that I would actually want to ride around. And the fact that it's foldable, even better. The
Yeah,
one thing I didn't love is this light coming off the back here. How come they didn't put that like on the back of the seat or whatever?
yeah, it's definitely got like a very long cantilever back there. And I didn't even notice while riding it that it was sort of like bouncing and flexing that arm that holds it until I went and checked the footage afterwards and was like, wow, that light's kind of like bouncing around there. So I was a little surprised looking back and seeing how much it bounced there. I was on like a pre-production prototype bike, so it could be that something that gets strengthened, or they just use a heavier gauge aluminum. I mean, I think that'd be an easy fix, right? To just, increase the thickness of that part so that it doesn't vibrate the tail light. But like you're saying, mounting it on the seat post or like in the seat clamp, I think would solve that as well, because you just don't need such a long arm to hold it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, overall, it's like super impressive. Like, hats off to this company that keeps making like low cost, compelling bikes.
Yeah, and on both ends of the spectrum too. Like,
Right.
they went down market, they went up market. Like, really cool to see them branching out.
Yeah. All right. So we're moving on to a similar bike, sort of, but a little bit higher end. Luna launches its first hub motor e-bike and lowest cost model yet, the feature-packed Luna Eclipse.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with Luna Cycle, I mean, Seth, maybe you can give us a little bit of background on Luna. Like, it's a very special company.
Yeah, so started by Eric Hicks, who's a like super interesting guy. I went to a Tesla event with him a few years ago. I visited his shop in LA near the El Segundo. Um, super like he's super into every single small detail. He's super into high performance, and not just like motors and drivetrain, but also high performance components, brakes, like everything. I think he comes from a background of competitive cycling. Some of the top managers there are also competitive cyclists, and then I think he got into the it's something with the batteries of some kind of battery part that he could bring over, and he kind of put the company together with like really good supply chain stuff together with like high quality component parts. And Luna builds like batteries and for off the shelf stuff. They build kits for people who are doing their DIY, but they also like all their bikes are just like crazy top end stuff. And
Yeah,
they're
sorry, go
they're
ahead.
not super interested in like class one, kind of not their thing. So
Yeah, they don't do anything half clutch.
right.
And so that makes this bike so interesting, because this is actually the lowest cost Luna bike that they've ever developed, but there's nothing like low quality about it. So it's a full suspension folding bike to start, which normally that would like ratchet up the price right away. But it's only $1,395. Then when you look at what it includes, they've got a 1,000-watt hub motor on there, 1,000-watt peak. And that also makes this the first hub motor powered bike from Luna, because they've only done mid drives up to this point. It's got good quality components. There's not hydraulic brakes. That's the one thing that I would have loved to have seen. And personally, I might have spent a little bit more than $1,400 if it had hydraulic brakes. But I get that, Luna and Eric, that they're trying to make this as affordable as possible and still give people a Luna branded bike while targeting more of a mass market customer.
Yeah, I mean, this thing's quite tempting. I can't wait to give it a spin. But also it's got a Gates belt drive.
Right. Oh yeah. There's so many parts here. I totally forgot about that one. So yeah, like if you're not familiar with Gates, it's probably the leading belt manufacturer for electric bikes. I mean, they do belts for everything. Like the Harley Davidson Livewire has it. Zero uses their belts. So they build for super high power projects. They build for low power things. But in the e-bike world, Gates is basically the standard. There are other companies, but if you've got a Gates belt, then you've got a product that's going to last literally tens of thousands of miles. So with this bike, you never have to worry about, chain maintenance, oiling it, tension. It's a single speed, so, you don't have a derailleur or anything. But you've just got this like whisper quiet transmission that is going to be maintenance free and not give you any problems. So that's another huge thing, especially for someone who wants a folding bike, because you're probably living in an apartment, you're living in an active lifestyle, you're commuting each day on the subway, so you got to bring your bike on there. You're not looking to have problems with maintaining your derailleur all the time. So that's another really cool feature here, and another reason that it's kind of crazy that he was able to get this price at $1,395 with such good quality name brand components.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is just, it's kind of like if I was going to build, like an absurd, like BMXy folding bike, this is kind of what it would come out looking like. So for me, it's like, he hit all the right spots. And for $1,400, like, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
All right. Moving forward, we're going to talk about the Blix Ultra 28 mile per hour fat tire electric bike with a 1,350 watt motor and 80-mile range.
This is an interesting bike for Blix because before the Ultra here, they really focused on this Dutch style sort of leisure pleasure cruisers. They had a very nice, elegant folder, but this is like an almost an urban assault bike. You can do off-roading with it. It's definitely sort of a dual sport bike like that, but it's got the fat tires, it's got the front suspension, it's got an aggressive geometry that you'd look for in like an adventure style bike. So right off the bat, it's a very different design for Blix. But then, we're talking about 2 batteries here, class 3, so that means it can go up to 28 miles per hour. It's got a powerful motor, 750 watts continuous, but that's what it has to say on the sticker, right, to be legal. What it's actually putting out is closer to 1,350 watts of peak power. Plus, it's got 90 Newton meters of torque, which is, one of the higher torque hub motors out there. You can get higher with mid drives, but for a hub motor bike, I mean, that's 90 Newton meters. That's some serious torque. So the performance here is impressive. High power, long range with the 2 batteries, suspension, hydraulic disc brakes. And personally, I also love that frame, how it's got sort of that drop down in there. If you're not watching the video here with us live, then it's got a sort of a typical diamond frame to a bike, but right in front of the seat post, the frame actually drops down lower. So if you were to hop forward from a high seating position, you're not going to, catch yourself in a uncomfortable position, you could say.
Yeah, it's quite an important piece. Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
amazing. When are we going to see a review of this one?
So it's not available yet. I don't remember the shipping time yet, but it's their newest model. They just unveiled it a couple days ago, and so it's going to be a little while, I think, until they're rolling into people's driveways.
Cool. Hopefully this summer. All right, moving forward, Rad Power Bikes resetting to refocus on its electric bike customers and more physical stores. And resetting usually means some layoffs.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is sort of an interesting but also sad story. So, on the one hand, Rad Power Bikes is ending their Rad Mobile service, where Rad Mobile was their fleet of, I think it was almost 100 vans or so of these, big panel vans that would go around to people's homes. They would, build bikes that people had bought, so it arrives pre-built for you. They would do maintenance. So, if you don't live near a bike shop or you just have a busy lifestyle and can't go to a bike shop, they'll come right to your house and work on your bike in your driveway. They would even do test rides. So if you wanted to buy a Rad Power bike, but like you were kind of thinking between 2 models or something, they'd bring the models and you could test them out and then choose the one that you wanted to buy. So it was a really cool service. I used it multiple times. I knew a few of the mechanics. They were awesome people. And so it's sad to see the Rad Mobile service ending. The rationale that I got from Mike and others in the company was basically that this was a way to sort of streamline their operations amid rising costs. We've seen Rad have to raise prices of bikes by a little bit. It's not just Rad, it's going around the industry. Many leading e-bike companies are raising prices. Their pricing pressures from the cost of materials, the exchange rate, sky high shipping costs for containers. Rad even chartered their own container ships to try and combat the rising shipping prices. So there've been a lot of pressures, and they're sort of trimming off something that I think wasn't super cost effective with this mobile service. But what they're doing instead is they're going to be expanding their brick and mortar retail locations. So they're going to be coming to the East Coast. There's going to be a Florida location. There's going to be, I believe, a Brooklyn location. And then I think one in Texas as well, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the first 3 they're going to be opening this year. But then there are apparently a number of other locations that they haven't announced the exact cities yet. And so they're really going to invest in expanding their physical brick and mortar stores. They can try and get more people into sort of this surrounding rad experience. So there they can do service, they can test bikes, etc. And then at the same time, they're still going to work with their partners with VeloFix for mobile service. So if you relied on someone to come by with a van and work on your bike, you can still get that with a third-party company that Rad contracts with.
Yeah, so it's kind of a shame they had like around 100 of these things, right?
Yeah, it was, not a small undertaking. They spent years building up Rad Mobile, and it was one of the things that really differentiated them from other companies because no one else had that kind of reach or that kind of, power to invest in such an interesting but obviously cost-intensive service.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't like sell that piece of the business to VeloFix or those employees as well to kind of just sold off that part of the company to another, or just like spun it out as a, because you know it seems like a really valuable service, definitely adds value, like for people who don't live near a bike shop, this is perfect. You have a broken controller or something, get it fixed like pretty quickly. Seems like pretty awesome. It's really sad to see it go, but I guess it wasn't top line bringing in and good money, so they're outsourcing that to VeloFix now.
Yeah, and it makes sense. That's, all VeloFix does. And, Rad is a bike company that get people on bikes. They don't necessarily run mobile van services.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting space. We'll keep an eye on that. Moving forward, Ride One Up Prodigy 28-mile-per-hour electric bike begins delivery, dropping mid-drive e-bike prices to new low. So love this. Might be my next, daily driver. I don't know. We'll see.
Definitely. I know you're a fan of those Broza motors. So
Yep.
here we've got another Broza mid-drive motor. And generally, any bike with a German-made mid-drive motor is going to be quite expensive. But the Prodigy here comes in at $2,300, which it's not cheap for an electric bike, but is cheap for a German motor electric bike.
Yeah, I mean, these are the motors that Specialized uses on a lot of their bikes. It's kind of, I would probably say, all else being equal, a Broza motor is going to be the best experience you're going to get if you're into pedal assist and get getting some exercise, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of Bosch fanboys out there, and Bosch makes a nice motor, but putting them next to each other, I've always had a nicer experience on Broza motors. So it's great to see Ride One Up going that direction. And just like with the Lectric XPremium, that was that company's first mid-drive bike. This is Ride One Up's first stab at a mid-drive bike. And so it's really cool to see these companies that are really more of these value-oriented e-bike companies, whereas Lectric is more on the budget end. Ride One Up is generally in the 13 to $1,600-ish range. So they're, a bit higher, closer to Rad prices, but it's great to see them enter the mid-drive space and help bring these prices down compared to, $3,000-$4,000 like we're used to seeing for a typical high-end mid-drive electric bike. And, we're still getting good parts here. We've got a nice suspension fork. We've got hydraulic disc brakes. We've got the included fenders and rear rack, depending on the model. There is a sort of mountain bike-ish version of this that doesn't come with the fenders or rear rack, but you do get that suspension fork. So there's a lot of good parts here, integrated battery, multiple frame styles, multiple sizes, a lot to like, especially for a company that, focuses on bringing prices down.
Yeah, and like you would expect a company like this to go with like a like a Bafang mid-drive motor, or any number of like kind of, I would say, mid-tier quality mid-drives, but going all the way with the Broza is pretty impressive here.
Yeah, I definitely give them respect for that, for not, going too far down the product hierarchy there and going with, the cheapest mid-drive.
All right. Next up, look and listen as we get our first video of the Ducati racing electric motorcycle doing hot laps.
So Ducati has an interesting history with electric motorcycles. The company spent years sort of saying that, they're not going to build electric motorcycles until the technology is ready, that, they can't put enough battery in them to actually give the performance that people want out of a Ducati, etc. And then like weeks after the last statement from someone high up in Ducati's, I don't think it was a C-level executive, but one of the vice presidents, suddenly they announced, all right, we're going to make the new Moto E electric motorcycles starting in 2023 after Energica finishes their contract. And so now we're getting our first real look at the prototype of the Ducati V21L, which I think is the temporary name for the bike. And I got to say, for a company that was denying that it was possible to build a Ducati electric motorcycle until a few months ago, they've got a pretty nice looking bike
Yeah,
here.
this wasn't thrown together in a couple of months. This has been worked on for years, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I've spoken to Energica's CEO, and she maintains that Ducati definitely had at least one Energica bike in their workshop doing benchmarking, examining how it was built. So they were able to leapfrog the technology a bit by looking at another important Italian electric motorcycle company. But regardless of how they got there, it definitely looks like they've gotten there, because they've got a very impressive, great looking electric racing motorcycle that they've already said is going to directly lead to a consumer bike that will follow using a lot of the technology they've developed. So it's great to finally see progress being made at Ducati.
Yeah, and for me, what's kind of exciting about this is we see that because it's an electric, they don't need as much air intake to cool off the motor. They can make it way more aerodynamic, and theoretically, that's going to make highway driving, uh, a little bit less energy intensive. So, uh, fantastic, fantastic here. I don't know what do you think about like the design here?
I mean, this is obviously purpose built for Moto E racing. So this is a highly aggressive stance, fully fared. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to ride this, but I did check out the bike that it's supposedly based on, which is the Energica Ego, and that one is also, it's such an aggressive riding stance that you feel like your knees are up in your throat kind of thing.
Oh,
And I, I personally would never want to ride a bike like this, just because that's not my type of riding. I ride for like leisure, but for the guys that really want to get out there and just, drag knee in the corners, this is definitely going to be an interesting bike when they start producing a consumer version.
yeah, yeah. The Crotch Rocket folks are gonna love it. All right. One last one is the awesomely weird Alibaba vehicle of the week, a $500 self-balancing one-wheel dorkmobile.
This one was surprisingly popular. Some of these are a little hit or miss, and people had some space in their heart for this weird little self-balancing thing. So if you're just listening, I'll try and describe this to the best of my ability, though even looking at it, I'm not sure you'd understand what it was. There is one wide wheel, looks like it came off of a riding lawnmower. You're sitting on a sort of motorcycle style seat, or I guess it's a bicycle saddle, but you're sitting, motorcycle style straddling this thing. And you've got handlebars on this sort of protrusion out in front of you. But other than that, you're kind of like jetsoning around on a self-balancing wheel. And
Don't forget the foot pegs that are coming out for the. I don't know where do those even connect to?
it is unclear, right?
They're just floating.
Yeah, you've just got these floating foot pegs that look quite nice. But I mean, the weirdest thing of all, there's a lot of weird things, but the weirdest thing of all here to me is that with a self-balancing electric vehicle, like a hoverboard or a electric unicycle or anything, the control protocol is generally you lean forward to go forwards and you lean backwards to slow down and stop. But this appears to have both a throttle and a brake lever. And that seems like a bad idea, because if you're, going forwards and you pull the brake lever, you're liable to just, face plant into the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how this works. I mean, it's so cheap. It's like, I mean, cheap for something like this. It's like $400, something like that, that I kind of want to get one and just see how the heck this thing works. But I think I'll have to update my life insurance policy first.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't know if you have enough like leather and padding to make it make sense.
Like a football helmet.
They didn't have any videos, did they? Because I think that would maybe I don't know, dispel any concerns or probably make them even worse.
Yeah, unfortunately, no videos. I would have loved to have seen this in action, but they definitely have some models sitting on them, so we know that they exist in some form.
Right. And so did it have like a top speed or any specs on the motor?
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 18 kilometers an hour, something like that. So like 12 miles an hour,
Okay, so
maybe
it's
15.
it's basically a sitting Segway at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not, high performance, but it's not a toy either. It's not 5
Right.
miles an hour.
Right. So you're not going to die. You're just going to be in the hospital probably.
Yeah, you might wish that it had gone
Right.
faster and finished the job.
Right. Well, yeah, I would love to see one of these being reviewed. Let's move into comments here before we head out. There's a lot of comments today, so I'm going to try to pick some good ones. Let's see. So Fred Lambert, our editor-in-chief at Electrek, thought the black vintage was sick. I agree. Fred joined us throughout the show with some great commentary. So Tyler Donoho says, I'm confused how it is a class 2. Does it cease being a class 2 if you increase the speed? We're talking about vintage still here. Yeah, why don't you dive into that?
Sure, yeah. So it's a bit of legal gray area, but they ship limited to class 2 speed and power. So when it shows up, if you twist the throttle, it's going to stop at 20 miles an hour. And if you're climbing a hill, you're going to be like, why isn't this flying up so fast? It's because it's limited to 750 watts. So the user has to go in and unlock it, which is usually either like a key code in the display or through a phone app. And at that point, you're removing the restrictions, and it's on you that you're taking it out of class 2 mode. That's sort of how the company stays legal there, because it's your responsibility to ride it somewhere where you're allowed to, like a abandoned airstrip.
Right. But the temptation to open it up on a regular road is going to be hard for a lot of people, myself included, to resist. And to that, Fred also adds, it's always legal as long as you don't get caught, which I'm not sure if that's exactly the law, but
Illegal might not be the right word.
Legal is not the right word. Doable, right? Let's see. These bikes have always been awesome, but how many locks would you need to use to be able to leave these outside for 30 minutes and have them still where you want there when you return? That's a great question. We should have asked Andrew that. How many locks? Maybe like 6 or 7. What do you think?
Yeah, I would hire a guard.
Yeah, maybe you
a breathing lock.
You put a couple like 35 air tags on it, and and hopefully you beat it to the boat to off the continent. All right, moving on. Tyler Donahoe says, I feel like race mode makes it motorcycle mode. I think that's pretty accurate. 40 miles per hour is getting into that space, and obviously the bike looks like that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about that bike is it is built like a motorcycle. Like everything is thick. We said overproduced, or what do you say? Over engineered.
Overbuilt, I'd say. Yeah.
Overbuilt. Yeah. It's just like everything on there can take 35 miles per hour. Like if you're going 35 miles per hour on a Walmart bike down a hill, like things are shaking, wobbling, like it gets scary. On this thing, it just feels like you're cruising, and it's a big difference, like having overbuilt stuff. All right, moving on. The e-bike subreddit is absolutely full of people's conversion kits now. Yes, and frankly, I have a conversion kit. It's a fun thing to do. I kind of feel like it should be a course in school, like take your bike and turn it into an e-bike. Be
auto
very
shop for today.
Yeah, very popular class, I bet. All right, Fred's back. Put a saddle seat on this, and I'll trade in my Suron. I don't think that's impossible. We could probably do that.
It'd be a good deal too, because the Suron's like half the price.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Let's see. We got Tom Pierce wondering about e-bike options for doubling a 9-year-old kid on the back. So what do you think for having a kid on the back?
One of my favorite passenger carrying e-bikes is the Rad Runner. It's just so well designed for carrying people. I think that would
it's
be
fun.
the first one to look at.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was on my father-in-law's Rad Runner carrying around my 10-year-old all week last week in Florida. So can't recommend that enough. Let's see. Will you moving on here? All right, here's one. Tyler Donahoe again. I have a lot of friends with small apartments that would love a folder like this. I think we're talking about the Electrek, or
The
sorry,
XP Lite.
the XP Lite. They're already poor and can't afford things like Bromptons or Turns. That's great. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's the prime market. It's people that want a fold bike to fit into a, very urban 21st century lifestyle, but don't have the dollars that those generally take.
Yeah. All right. A few more. Lectric turned out to be a great company. I met one of the owners when I tried out the first XP, and they have a great line of affordable bikes that won't break the bank. Let's see. Moving on. Oh, here's Fred again, but from the Facebook group. He's hitting us from all sides. I think he's talking about the Luna here. Is it me or the back suspension looks kind of flimsy? It did look a little flimsy, but I'm sure it's not. What do you think about that on the Luna?
So it's direct suspension, which is never as comfortable or high performance as when you have linkage. There's a lot of different suspension designs out there with multi-point. There's 4-point, 5-point, and there's a lot of interesting designs. Then there's a simple spring between two parts of a bike on a hinge, and that's what Luna went with. So it's not sophisticated suspension, direct rear suspension, but as long as they're using decent parts, which Luna always has, I trust that it's going to be fine, if not the highest performance.
All right. That's the end of our questions here.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us again. We will be back in another 2 weeks with the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. We'll see you then.